notably for our marketing assistance. What you see on the website right now is our new calendar, events calendar, called the Tallahassee Arts Guide. It's much more than an events calendar, though, so I want to just begin by introducing you to what COCA offers in terms of marketing or research opportunities for you in terms of finding out what's going on and what's available in the community. So, the Tallahassee Arts Guide, at the top of the page there, you'll see categories for events and educational opportunities. And they're listed and broken down by categories. So for example, if you want to know what's going on in the dance community in Tallahassee, you can click on the dance tab to receive a listing of all of the dance-related events. There we go. Available. So you'll see, and they're usually by date. If you are presenting a dance performance, you can add your information relatively easy to our event calendar, or any kind of arts-related performance. Art, history, dance, film, heritage, music, theater, literature, classes and workshops are also listed. So if you are presenting something to the community, either a performance, a lecture, a class, and it's arts-related in some way, you can share it with the community. We have an email that goes out every Monday to reach about 10,000 local individuals. That's our Tallahassee Arts Guide email with all the week's events, upcoming events for the week. So this is a great resource for you if you're engaged in programming in the community, either academic or performance-related programming. There's also some great categories which I wanted to see free on there, so I got a free tab, which is great because a lot of grad students and other folks are not able to afford some of our cultural offerings, so we do have a tab specifically for free events in the community. We also have listings for kids and camps. That's not all, though. That's not all that this website and the COCA offers. If you scroll down just a little bit more, this right column here gives you lots of information about our local arts community. Tabs for directories, classifieds, grants, arts education, and an opportunity to submit listings. Can everyone hear me okay? By the way, I should have asked that earlier. Is everyone okay sound-wise hearing me? Okay, great. Directories. If you are a performer or have a performance group in the community, you can add yourself to our artist directory. If you provide any kind of arts education, we have an arts education directory. We have an organizational directory for arts organizations. So all of the local arts organizations are listed on here in the community, and they can be sorted by discipline or state. For example, we don't just serve Tallahassee and Leon County. It serves a 100-mile radius. So there's arts organizations from outside of the Leon County area as part of our directories. And finally, we offer a public, public art directory, which is really valuable, and many people may not even know it exists. We want you to know, if you're looking for any piece of public art, we have all of the public art here on FSU's campus, and we give the name of the artist who created the work. And there's also, we've created this wonderful resource to share with your students and community members, walks in Tallahassee. That's available in public art. It's available under, if you want to explore public art here in our and then finally, let's say you're like me and you're producing a performance and you're looking for it. We have a space directory for venues in town that offer performance spaces. However, one quick word about classifieds. This is a new program that COCA's offering, but we offer all kinds of opportunities for you to For example, under the classified section, you'll see there's theater opportunities, calls for dancers. If you're looking for dancers, calls for filmmakers, calls for musicians, vendors, visual artists, writers. That classified section is pretty diverse in terms of But let's, I'm going to spend most of the time today talking about grants and our grant programs. So, as a, COCA is a independent 501c3, but we are quasi-legal in the sense that we are, quasi-governmental, I should say. We are fully legal. Quasi-governmental in the sense that we are funded largely through Leon County and the city of Tallahassee. As such, all of our sort of programs, including our grant programs, are under sunshine laws and have to be very sort of publicly noted and reviewed in a sort of public way. So traditionally, COCA has offered what's called the Cultural Grant Program to the Leon County community, including organizations and groups at FSU would be eligible. And that program was funded by Leon County government as well as the city of Tallahassee. We traditionally funded about $900,000 in grants up until last year, where we increased the budget thanks to the improving economy. We were able to increase our budget to about $993 for this current fiscal year for that program alone. The Cultural Grant Program, and I'll describe each in detail, that's our largest grant program by far. The Cultural Program has two goals in mind. First, we seek to fund events, organizations which have some sort of a tourist appeal. Those programs are funded through tourist development tax dollars. Those are state mandated how they can be used, those funds that come to us from Leon County. And the program or the organization has to have some sort of an outreach or appeal or marketing efforts outside of Leon County. That may not be your goal or mission for your organization, obviously, but if you want those funds, we can work with you to teach you how to have a marketing plan that is more broad than just your students at FSU. So in order to be eligible for those funds, which is 90% of the Cultural Grant Program budget, you must be making marketing efforts and reaching tourists, and with the idea of coming into Tallahassee and promoting Tallahassee as a cultural destination. 10% of the Cultural Grant Program budget is funded by general revenue. That's less restrictive in terms of how it can be used. So we do have 10% of that budget which can be used for educational projects which have no tourism appeal. But for example, if you're doing a program that goes into the Leon County schools and reaches students in the classroom, we couldn't fund that program with tourism development tax dollars because there's really no tourism impact. We can fund that program with our general revenue funds. There is money available currently. It's a small amount, but there is funding for specifically what we call quality of life or mostly education-related projects that are not under the sort of tourism umbrella. In addition to that, this year we rolled out a new grant program, and again, this is also funded with tourism development tax money from Leon County. It is restrictive in terms of how the funds can be used and who's eligible according to state statute, and that's our Cultural Facilities Matching Grant Program. The state actually also has a Cultural Facilities Matching Grant Program. Ours is a little different. I'll explain the differences. In terms of eligibility, there's no difference. You have to be either, according to state statute, you have to be either a state museum, as we have someone from the FSU Museum here today, or a public auditorium. The auditorium can be publicly owned, so for example, an FSU facility would be eligible, or it can be nonprofit owned. This past year, we did have an FSU facility apply for funding under the Cultural Facilities Matching Grant Program, and that was FSU's Ruby Diamond Auditorium. So FSU facilities would be eligible for that program. In terms of the awards, we have a budget of approximately $250,000 for that program. The cap for an award is $100,000. The floor, right? If your organization is student-based or university affiliated, it may be able to apply under a department of FSU as a state partner, which is the second category, 1A. Is your organization a department, museum, or other organization working under the FEID number of the state of Florida, Florida State University? So for those of you who have an organization which is a cultural-related organization which is working under FSU, you would be eligible for the grant program under that classification. Otherwise, you have to have 501c3 status. Secondly, does your organization have arts and or history activity as its primary purpose? You can't do arts on the side. It has to be a part of your mission. Has your organization been providing programming in your discipline for at least 3 complete fiscal years? You must have at least 3 years of programming history. Your events and programs must take place in Leon County. You must have a professional staff. Staff can be volunteer, unpaid, but they must be sort of a professional staff. You must have, as required by 501c3s, you must have a board of directors that meets regularly and operates under a set of bylaws. You must demonstrate institutional planning, long-range plans, visioning, etc. You must have a ongoing year-round programming. So if you're a one-off event once a year, you would not be eligible for the cultural grant program. You must have year-round programming. That doesn't mean something going on at all times of the year. It just means more than one event a year, more than 2 events a year. Has to be sort of year-round. Okay. Do you keep documented statistics on attendance and participation? Do you have accessibility plan in place, and are you in compliance with ADA regulations? And those are the eligibility requirements. If you're interested in applying for this program or learning more about it, I'm more than happy to have a further discussion with you. But those are the kind of qualifying eligibility requirements. The same requirements hold for the cultural facilities program, with the only additional requirement being you must be, as I mentioned, a publicly owned facility or a museum. Finally, the third marketing grant program that we offer is to promote tourism. This is a new program this year as well. The budget is for FY17 is approximately $70,000. The cap for the award is $3,000. The eligibility requirements are a little bit lesser than the cultural grant program. You don't have to have year-round programming to be eligible for this program. If you do a festival once a year, you would be eligible for this marketing grant. I should say none of these grants are unfortunately available for individual artists. You must be organization to be eligible. But if you're affiliated with a nonprofit organization, or if you want to apply under some aspect of the university, you would be eligible. So this is specifically for marketing opportunities. Can someone give me a sense of how we're doing for time? We're at time? Okay, sorry. I'll just take 2 more minutes then, okay? The examples of marketing kinds of opportunities: printed materials, videos, trade show rentals, media communications, website improvements and development, promotional items are all covered under the marketing grant. Okay, so let me just say one more thing about our grant programs. Or sorry, let me see. One more thing I want to point out to you. If you are, oh, that's not what I want. Okay, where is it? Here we go. Okay. If you are an individual artist, or if none of those grant opportunities appeal to you or apply to you, but you're still looking for grant funding, the final tab on our grant homepage is Other Funding Opportunities. COCA is a warehouse for, our website is a warehouse for as many grant opportunities that we can find in the community. Not just local grants, but regional and national grants. Not just organizational grants, but individual artist grants. Not just performance grants, but educational grants or arts education grants, and specific discipline grants, like filmmakers, for example. So if you're interested in those kind of opportunities, there's many of them, and you would have to just click here for the directory, and again, it can be sorted by type, and you can review those at your leisure. So again, to find this information, where do you go? You're going to just go to the COCA website, which is tallahasseearts.org. Where is it here? Hold on. And then, sorry, here we go. You're going to go to the Tallahassee Arts Guide and then click on grants here on the side of the page for this information. And I'm happy to answer additional questions when we get to that part. Thank you.
Now, where's mine going to be? Right there? Yeah, there we go. Yep, that's it. Great. Super, thank you. Good morning. My name's Diane Wakeman, and I'm the Grants Director at the Florida Humanities Council. I want to say thanks, Kevin. I learned a lot, and I've got some questions for you. So, but I'm here today to talk to a little bit about funding opportunities with the Florida Humanities Council. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to tell you a little bit about who we are. But I will tell you that our website is floridahumanities.org, and we're easy to find. So, the Florida Humanities Council is actually the state affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities. The organization was formed here in Florida back in 1973, and we're based in St. Petersburg, but of course we cover the entire state, and I'm happy to have an excuse to be in Tallahassee. Our dollars, the monies that we operate under the Humanities Council as a whole come from the NEH in huge part, also in part from the state of Florida, and we too are a 501(c)(3) independent nonprofit, so we do have private money that comes in. Some of it's restricted, some of it is not. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Humanities Council, but within the grant funding, this is our re-grant money, this $360,000. The portion that I actually want to concentrate on today for 2017 applications is about $150,000, and it's for open, what we call mini grants, up to $5,000. So, what type of projects do we fund? Let me say first and foremost, the first question that one of our application reviewers is going to ask of your application is, where are the humanities in this? Now, what we try to do is offer public programming, free public programming to Floridians, ideally that has some Florida theme to it, but if it doesn't, then we want to know that the subject matter or content is actually of interest to Floridians, okay? And we want to know that that content is being offered within the lens of one of the humanities disciplines. Now, I'm here in College of Arts and Sciences, I think, university. I will just say that because this question comes up a lot, so what are the humanities? I'd like to think that all of you have an understanding of that. I'm sure you do, but I'll bet every single one of you has a different definition. And even though we were founded in 1973, we still struggle around the staff meeting table with how to define the humanities to a lay public. So to make it easy, we'll talk about programming that's offered under an umbrella of history, archaeology, human geography, religion, ethics, politics, literature, and the intersection of any of those with the sciences, okay? We like to we don't really want a black and white border around it, but a gray border and some flexibility is real nice. So within the realms of the humanities, and within the realms of a subject or topic that's of interest to Floridians, these are the types of projects that we typically fund. Interpretive exhibits, oral history projects, radio programs, podcasts. We'll help you develop a website. But first and foremost, we want to know that the project is geared to a broad and general public, i.e. not a specific audience, not just senior citizens, not just school children, but a broad and general public. And that in an ideal world, your organization, because you do have to be attached, the sponsoring organization for the application has to be a Florida-based nonprofit. It could be a city department, it could be a college department, it could be a small nonprofit that is entirely volunteer served, but that your sponsoring organization is collaborating with other nonprofit organizations in the community. That doesn't always happen. It doesn't mean that your project wouldn't get approved, but it sure does make us feel good to know that we're inspiring collaboration within the greater nonprofit community. Again, the criteria, your project must be rooted in the humanities, and I would just say, rather than trying to worry about whether or not your project is, just asking yourself the question, because our reviewers are going to ask it, where are the humanities in this project, okay? We do ask in an ideal application that you indicate that you've enlisted the expertise of a humanities scholar or a person who has credibility within the realm of one of those disciplines in your community. An example might be the president of the local historical society. Now that person may be 75 years old, may not have a college degree, but has lived and breathed the history of that community for 70 years. We'd consider that person to be an expert in the field of history in that community. Again, we like opportunities for the public to be engaged in thoughtful and informed activities that explore humanities topics. I will tell you that no matter what you read on our website about eligibility criteria, every review committee is different, and the chemistry of every review committee is different. And this is how our applications get scored, or your applications get scored. Everything is done online. It's an online application. Like I'm sure my colleagues will say, be sure you dot your I's and cross your T's when you fill out the application. But remember that, you know, we humans are subject to a lot of flexibility. So despite what the criteria says here, there's a little bit of play in the way your application can be received, depending on the strength of your application. I would encourage you always to call me and talk about your ideas before you even begin the application, just to save yourself some time in the event that the project is not eligible for funding. And eligibility for funding can be, again, sometimes a little bit of a gray area. I'll tell you right now, the mission of the board is heavily leaning, the desire of the board is heavily leaning towards wanting to see projects that involve active community conversation, okay? So if you have a project that involves a panel discussion or facilitated discussion, that's a real good point. We want to stimulate people to talk about opportunities, about what they're learning. We want to talk about how they might be changed by ideas and how they're getting to know more about their community. Within the realm of eligibility, you cannot currently have an open grant with us. Our funding is provided on a dollar-for-dollar match basis. So if you are awarded $5,000 from us, we're going to have asked you for an indication of how you plan to match that $5,000. That in-kind match can be service or cash. There's no high percentage involved. A lot of people worry that they need a certain amount of cash to prove a match to the dollars that we offer, but that's not the case. And in fact, some organizations, and our goal is to serve small, in many cases we're happy to serve smaller, underserved communities around the state who may not have a very big budget, who may not have paid staff, and their operating budget is pretty meager. So it's not required that the sponsoring organization have a lot of cash in hand, and if it's a good application. So right now we are offering up to $5,000 in mini grants. These are open grants. It can be for any kind of project within the realm of what's eligible for funding. We have a deadline coming up on the 3rd of October. That's, I'm sure, too soon for many of you, but I've posted our 2017 mini grant deadlines. We'll let you know within a month of the deadline whether or not you've received funding. And then the contract is awarded immediately after, and it's a 12-month award period. So your project has to occur within the 12 months from the award date. The programming cannot occur within 6 weeks of that award date or the beginning of your contract. And the reason for that is because we want to give you time to be able to include acknowledgement of our sponsorship in any publicity materials, press releases, printed materials. I always encourage everyone to review the Before You Apply webpage on our site, and gives you some tips about application processes. So how would you start an application with us? Everything, like I said, is done online. The application is online. It's pretty simple. You can get to the landing page. Rather than try and look at the application in form format, I encourage people to download the PDF question list so you have a quick overview of what kind of questions are going to be asked on the application. It's pretty simple. You're very limited in the amount of space that you have. And again, there is an application guide, which I encourage people to pay attention to. And of course, questions, call me or email me. Sometimes we're asked, when I'm asked about whether or not a particular project sounds like it might be eligible, and the potential applicant is a little, I can tell, is a little uncertain in my reply that still whether or not they fit, I try to encourage folks to go to our Humanities in Action page, and on that page is listed all of our recently funded projects. So all the projects that have won funding over the last several years, but you can tuck into just the last year. And the amount of the award, the sponsoring organization, and a description and title of the project is listed there. And sometimes that helps folks kind of think, well, yeah, we might fit there. You know, we might fit with this, or we might not. Or it might prompt some more questions that I'm happy to answer. So get back in touch with me. I will just remind you of the kinds of projects that aren't funded. I think it's pretty evident. Unlike our other organizations, we don't offer funding for historic preservation or renovation of buildings and facilities. We don't offer funding for individual scholarly research projects, and we can't offer funding for food or refreshments, but that's a super opportunity for an in-kind match, maybe by somebody else in the community. What we do, though, when it comes to scholarly research or scholarly projects that involve scholars, is try to get that scholar to think about collaborating with a nonprofit organization in the community, whether it's your university department or it's another nonprofit within the community. That makes our hearts sing to see that kind of collaboration going on. I think some of this is pretty self-evident when it comes, since I'm on a university campus, when it comes to filling out an application. I just want to stress how wonderful it is if your narrative text is very clear, very concise, and easy to grasp and or imagine. And one of the tips that I like to offer folks is when you think your application is finished, print a copy of it and give it to somebody you know who knows nothing about the project or your goal, and ask them to read it. And every time they stumble over something or have a question or go, what does this mean? Or I don't get this. You know, where did this come from? Pay attention to those kinds of remarks, because that's exactly what our reviewers are going to do. And the harder you make it for them to understand it, of course, the more difficult it is. So I'm readily available. I'm happy to talk to folks anytime. I see a major part of my job as being an advocate for our applicants. So you cannot bother me. The number of times you call me or email me or ask questions has no bearing on your application, although I will tell you this. I do sit in on the review meetings, and many times the directors will turn to me, especially if they're confused, and say, Diane, have you talked with these folks? And I'm always so disheartened when of 100 applications, for 50 of those I can say, no, you know, this is the first I know of it. So 2 things. I'm happy to help you anywhere along the line. As you're working in your draft application, if you ask me to, I can go into it and look at it, and I will let you know if I see any red flags. I won't write your application for you, but I can tell you if I see a major problem. And I hope that happens after we've already talked about your project and whether or not it's a good fit for funding. So I think that covers it for right now, and I'll be happy to answer questions when we get to that point as well. Anything real important that comes to mind at this point? Okay, great. Thank you.
I do? And then it's just, this is on? Okay, great. Yeah, I can hear myself. Okay. I am Sarah Stage, and I'm with the Division of Cultural Affairs. And at the division, I'm a program manager, and I manage museum grants, visual arts, and I also manage a small grant program called Fast Track Grants. And I'm here with Hillary Crawford, and you manage?
I manage media arts, multidisciplinary presenter. I also do the artist funding program, the cultural endowment program, and art and state buildings.
And then in the back of the packet that we gave you today, it'll list all of our other program managers that manage the other disciplines that we'll be talking about today. I don't know. Is it on? Okay, it's on. Okay, great. Okay, today what we're going to be talking about is our grant deadlines, the funding timeline, and the grant cycle. And we're also going to be talking about general program support grants and specific cultural projects, and also our fast track grant program and some application tips today. We're not actually going to be going over all of the programs at the division. We decided to sort of pick out the programs that we thought would be pertinent to the individuals that are attending today. And up on the screen, you will see our annual grant deadlines. For all of our major programs, we have a yearly deadline of June 1st. And the grant period for that, which is general program support, projects, also our cultural facilities and endowment programs, is July 1st through June 30th of every year. And then we also have a fast track grant program that we're going to talk about today. And that grant program has 2 deadlines a year that are 6 months. And it's March 12th and September 12th of every year. And then today I was just going to go over the funding timeline just so you kind of get an idea of the process that you have to go through throughout the year once you apply for a grant, once you go to the panel meeting, and then of course at the end of the year there's reporting. So you start out with April 1st of every year, 2 months prior to the deadline, which is what our policy is. We always make our guidelines and application available to everyone 2 months before the deadline is April 1st. And then every year we have how to apply webinars that are very helpful, that provide you with some more information that that I won't be talking about today, that help you apply for the grant in our online application system. And then June 1st is our deadline. And then once you have submitted your application, program managers go through the application and determine if it's eligible for the panel. And then we notify you whether it is or not. And then August through September of every year, we have our grant panel meetings, which we have just finished as of yesterday. And then And then every October, we provide a list to the legislature to let them know what we are recommending for funding, which is before we submit that list, it goes through the Florida Arts Council for review, and then it also goes to the Secretary of State. And then after that, the legislative session begins, which is going to be March through May. And then all grantees are required to submit a form that becomes part of the contract where you let us know how you're going to spend your grant funds. And then again, the grant period begins, and at the end of the grant period, all grantees are required to submit a final report. Go ahead. Okay, what happens is that, we have our grant panel meetings. Then we take all of the recommendations amongst all of the disciplines. We provide a list to the legislature with our recommendations for general program support, and then we have a list for specific cultural projects. The Fast Track grant program that we'll be talking about later is not included in that list because the funds are not from the state. So when we put that list together, the Florida Arts Council, which is basically the board of the State Arts Agency, reviews the recommendations, which they will be reviewing this year's in a couple weeks. They approve that, and then it goes to the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of State approves that, and then we forward it to the legislature. So during the session, the legislature decides how much funding we will receive. Also, the governor recommends how much funding he would like to provide the State Arts Agency. But in the end, it's usually the legislature that decides how much funding we're going to get, not necessarily the governor unless he vetoed it. Does that clear that up?
I guess you're not saying that the legislature sees the projects that you're approving.
The panel will review the application, and we have a scoring rubric for them based on the criteria that we set forth in the application. So you're scored by the panel. Usually you have 5 to 7 people on the panel. They will each give you an individual score. They will discuss applications at the meeting. You have the opportunity to participate and to be available if they have questions. It's always a teleconference. And then your scores are averaged amongst the panelists. You have to get a minimum of an 80 in order to be recommended for funding. But if you reach that threshold, you then become part of the list. So they see you on the list, but they see, like Florida State University, 7 days of opening nights, general program support, $150,000. And it's just a big list. But it becomes part of our legislative budget request.
Yes. And what's important about it is it lets the legislators know what organizations in their communities need funding and what the projects are in general, so that they're more likely to recommend funding, arts and cultural funding, because then they know it actually directly affects them, or it might directly affect their relatives or their friends in other counties or cities.
And we ask after the panel meeting, because we technically can't lobby, that's outside of the realm of what we can do, but we ask for our constituents to go forth after the list comes out in October and go to their individual representatives and lobby, and it actually ends up collectively being good for people throughout the state because it's one large list. But, that's a big thing that we, and there's a, Sharon Long does Florida Arts Alliance, and you'll hear she has calls and things, but we have a really great network of organizations throughout the state that do lobbying for that. So it has a huge impact.
And we specifically cannot lobby because we're part of the governor's office.
Just 2 quick things that you could just address. Number 1, you usually get what you ask for. Number 2, say you put in for $2 million and they gave you $1 million. Do you cut the amount of people that you're funded by 50%, or do you tell people that why that they have to what they ask?
Okay, I could just go over a little bit how we have a slide, but I'll just kind of go over it about how organizations are funded. We're going to be talking about specific cultural projects in just a little bit in Fast Track and general program support, but there is a difference in the way all 3 are funded. General program support and specific cultural projects both have their own separate line items. The Fast Track Grant Program, which is a small grant program that funds small organizations, the funding for that is provided from the National Endowment for the Arts. The only way we could create that program was to use some of our NEA grant funds to fund it, okay? For that program, you can ask for $2,500. I suggest that you ask for $2,500 instead of like, occasionally people don't, and I don't know why. And if you receive that grant, you will receive the $2,500, the amount you requested. If you apply for general program support, if the legislature provides us with all the funding that we requested, which has only happened once, and it's been about 3 years now, and that year we actually went from number 47 in the country in arts and cultural funding to number 3, and that just happened that happened like in a second when they decided to do that, okay? And it's never happened before. So in all the other years that it hasn't happened, an organization that asks for, let's say, $150,000 or whatever amount they ask for, they're only going to get a percentage of that request. So if you apply for general program support, you are going to get funded. But it could be a very small amount or it could be a lot. And how we determine that is based on what you requested, the score you received, and how much the legislature provided. We basically just run a formula, a computer formula, and then you end up with a percentage. So I'm just going to say this year, organizations that requested 150 got anywhere from 60, 70, 80,000 depending on their score. If you apply for a specific cultural project, which you can apply for up to $25,000 depending on the program or category within projects, you'll receive all or nothing. So you have to receive 80 points to get funding for any of our programs. So let's say you receive a 94.6 for a project. Doesn't mean you're going to get funded, even though that's a great score. So if the funding runs out before it gets down to you, you might not be funded. And that's kind of a way for organizations to kind of decide which they want to apply for. Is it better for you to just get a little bit of funding and like have our logo, you know, and then that'll help you raise more money? Or do you want to take the chance to get all or nothing? Okay. And then just like their grant programs too, you must be a not-for-profit tax-exempt organization, so you have to be a 501c3. One difference is, though, that we do fund city and county governments and public entities, which means we fund universities and we fund departments, okay? And then you also all have to comply with all the application and grant administration requirements, and you must match dollar for dollar. We do have an exception for ready communities, although Leon County is not a ready community. Franklin County near us is, but in the case that you were in a ready county, which stands for the Rural Economic Development Initiative, you would be able to waive your cash match. So you would only be required to have 50% match, and that would be in kind or cash match. The cash match does not have to be cash on hand. It's just cash match that you propose that you will have at some point before the end of the grant period.
And you can do up to 25% in kind.
In kind for all grants. Okay, and we do have a couple application restrictions, and this is something that actually really does affect universities because we have a policy that universities can submit more than one application for general program support as long as they fulfill some of our eligibility requirements. They have to have a segregated and itemized budget. They must have a board and be in a multi-purpose institution. So for example, 7 Days of Opening Nights receives a grant, and also the FSU Museum does because they meet all these requirements. If you don't meet these requirements, then you can apply for a project. So if you are part of a department, let's say you're part of the dance department or the music department, you're eligible for a specific cultural project. And then we do have 11 disciplines that you can apply to. Dance, visual arts, literature, multidisciplinary, professional and community theater, presenting, visual arts, traditional arts, media arts and music, and museums. And we can always help you with deciding which discipline might fit you best. Oh, and then we also do have a local arts agency category and a state service organization. And we, just to let you know, we do provide a grant to Kevin's organization, COCA, through our local arts organization category. And then for general program support, you can request up to 10% of your last completed fiscal year's operating budget for discipline-based. And then local arts agencies, it's for level 1, it's 25%. For level 2, it's 15%. And for level 3, it's 10%. And then for state service organizations, it's 20%. And for this upcoming year, we're proposing to increase the amount you can request for general program support so that it matches local arts agencies. And then we have a couple other requirements that you have to meet for your request amount if you're applying for general program support, and that is to request more than $25,000. You must have a completed grant with a division. And a lot of people think that, if you apply in June 1, that means by the next deadline you're going to have a completed grant. Well, you're not, because the next deadline is going to be before that grant ends and is completed and the final report's closed out. And then to request more than $50,000, you must have 3 years programming and at least 1 paid full-time staff member. And then I think Hillary's going to go ahead and talk about specific cultural projects and then give you some tips on applying for grants.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about projects. And,
You need to switch. Okay, sorry. There you go.
so, like Sarah said, if you are a department, then you are eligible to apply for a project. I actually had someone this year that applied as a project through the film department because we haven't had our artist funding for a while. But one of the things that I want to talk about is the fact that we have submitted again a proposal to actually create a new subcategory. These are the disciplines. We've proposed a new artist funding project category, which would mean that individuals would be eligible to apply for up to $25,000 for a project. So that means for you all, if you're doing, so you can actually drive the project yourself as an artist without having to partner either with a 501c3 or with your department. So we're hopeful. We had fellowships for a long time that were funded first through the NEA, where we kind of like the fast track, we took a chunk of our NEA money that we dispersed amongst artists for fellowships in the different disciplines. And when we started having to do this legislative budget request thing, we had a really hard time selling to the legislature the funding of individuals. They just really didn't see the value in that. So we have kind of, we did our part of our strategic plan. We met with artists and other people in the field and some of our local arts agency counterparts and came up with this idea that we hope will be affected. So the artist category will become a subcategory of that big projects list. So we're really excited about that because it has been several years since we've been able to fund individuals. And so April 1st, as Sarah said, hopefully that will be available. So I would encourage all of you to look into that because I think it's a really good opportunity. And that cap, we've never done that. I mean, we used to do like $5,000. So the $25,000, and there would be some match involved, but if you're doing projects, you're probably going to need more than $25,000 anyway. So, yes.
But I did just want to point out for the artist fellowship category, you do have to be a working artist and you cannot be a student.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah, we've always had that. You're supposed to be like a professional artist. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. But it wouldn't be for like, a student project, that kind of a thing. But yes, absolutely as a faculty member, that would be totally appropriate. And we have the same discipline categories that Sarah addressed earlier for our discipline-based projects. And so that would be where if you did want to partner with your department, you would probably fall into one of those. We also have, did I miss arts education? Okay, so we also have a category that's arts and education, and those are residency opportunities that you can do, like in the public schools or some sort of an arts partnership. And Michelle Smith-Grinberg is our person, and she's on that list. But, just like Diane said, always reach out to us if you have an idea for something. We can try to help you decide where it would fit and how we can make it work. And then going back, so the arts and education and the discipline base are both $25,000 is the max that you can request. And as Sarah indicated earlier, based on that rank list, it's funded top down, but it's fully funded or it's not funded. So it's not going to be a percentage. So if you ask for $25,000 and you're funded, you will get every penny of the $25,000. Then there's also some underserved really doesn't fit with you guys because we're not an underserved, but if you were to do work, with an organization maybe in like Franklin County or something, you can do smaller capacity building, or you can get funds to bring in a consultant to maybe help you with organizational development, or we also have a salary assistance program. And then finally, Fast Track is the other program that Sarah mentioned that she created. It is the one where we take the funds from the NEA. It's for our smaller organizations. They're kind of mini grants. $25,000 is the cap, and your organizational budget has to be $150,000 or less. But as she indicated, you're applying, like we just had a deadline in September. Once those people are notified, they will have funds that will be from January 1 to June 30th of next year. So instead of that 13-month turnaround, you have access to funds in a faster way. So it's really something that we kind of aim for our smaller organizations. There was something else that I wanted to say and I forgot. So this is where we get into how they're funded, which we kind of addressed. So just quick tips. Like Diane said too, I always say that to everyone too about getting someone that doesn't know about your thing to read it, because people will think that they're saying things or they'll think that they're answering questions. We had a lady in a meeting a couple weeks ago and they asked for a timeline and she was like, I didn't even notice that. And the panel said, why don't you have a timeline? And she was like, I totally missed that. So, read the question, make sure you're answering the question. A big thing that we have is that people do not understand goals and objectives. That's a huge thing. Learn the difference between goals and objectives. If we ask for measurable objectives, have them. When we ask for evaluation, tell us how you're going to evaluate a project. Not just quantitatively, but qualitatively. We are in the arts. Our website is the dosmyflorida.com, but all of our applications live in our online system, which is the apply.florida-arts.org. And the way that system works is that you actually sign on there and you're going to create a profile as an individual. And that is going to stay with you forever. That is your profile. And then if you want to do a grant associated with an organization, there's a little area that says like my organizations. You're going to go in and search for the organization. So let's say that you're going to do something for Alice. You're going to request an association with the FSU Fine Arts Museum. And then whoever's the administrator of that account will either approve it, or you can contact us if you're trying to do something for an organization where the person doesn't exist anymore. But you don't want to hijack someone else's account, because we do have individuals that serve as panel reviewers. And so it gets confusing because you'll think that you're putting somebody on your panel and then you get somebody else's bio and they're like, that's not me. So, and another thing, we do always recruit panelists. So if any of you are interested in serving as a panelist, you can nominate yourself in any of the disciplines, or you can nominate someone else, and you can do that through our website as well. It's a lot of work, but it can be very rewarding, and you learn a lot if you're ever going to write grants. So our review criteria is the excellence up to 40 points. Our main thing is that we fund excellence. Second is the impact up to 30 points, and that's where we're going to look at what the impact that you're projecting in your community. Then we also have management up to 20 points, and that comes in, they're going to look at how well your grant is written. They're going to look at if you have any long-range or strategic planning. They're going to look at your past reporting history. If you're doing a grant for an organization and it's 50 days late, the panel is going to see that when they review it, and they might say, why was your report 50 days late last year? And then accessibility is up to 10 points. And we do have a accessibility self-evaluation workshop on our website that you can do, that we always encourage people to do. That's a huge thing. And it's not just like mobility, building accessibility, but how is your programming accessible? What are you doing for people with visual or hearing impairments? We live in Florida. Are you addressing people that don't speak English? We have also symbols that you can download. So if you have support materials, we encourage you to include any of the accessibility symbols that apply to what you're doing. And then again, we do provide the rubric for you, and I think it's in the packet that you have, and that's basically what we give to the panelists when they're evaluating your applications. And it tells them, it's a guide for them when they're scoring. And everything is to a certain degree subjective, and some year, we have some people that like obsess about the budget, or we have some people that are really into accessibility, and that happens. But you can at least, have the framework of what they're going to be evaluating you under, and so you can try to write your application to that. And then again, the typos, grammatical errors. We've had people where they've like cut and paste from a Word document and they'll paste into the wrong section, or they'll paste into like something into 2 separate sections. So essentially they didn't answer a whole question. We always put exemplary applications on our website. And that happens around the April time, but you can also reach out to us. If you go into our website and look at the if you have a discipline that you're interested in, we actually provide the rank list, and that all of the panel meetings now should be up there. So you can see, because it's ranked from the top down. So if let's say you're doing something in literature, you can say, oh, these people got, 95 or above, and you can request a PDF of their application because it is public information. So we can provide that for you. And all of our support materials are upload only. So we do encourage you to include work samples since excellence is such a big deal. Any past press that you've gotten. If you're writing a project or a proposal, because we do fund the 13 months out, if you don't have every element of your festival or whatever you're doing as far as programming planned, then show examples of past things that you've done to kind of give an example of the artistic excellence that your organization has been presenting. Let's see. Oh, letters of support. That's a funny one because a lot of people go in and ask for letters from their representatives, and those are fine. But if you're doing programming, like we have an organization in Jacksonville, she does, it's called Hope to Hand, and she does writing with women that are in prison. So she has these really touching, heartfelt support letters that talk about the impact of her programming. And that, to me, is more important as a panelist than a letter from your senator that they give to everyone else. And then, again, the evaluation tools. If you have copies of your surveys or data from past surveys, those are always good as well. And this is what we talked about that's in your packet. These are all of our different program managers. I didn't really talk about the endowment program because I figured most of you would probably not be doing endowments, but if you need to know about it, you can reach out to me. Terry Abstein or Elsie Rogers are both our contacts for cultural facilities grants. Then we have Michelle, Jenny, Sarah, and I have different disciplines within the GPS and the project grants. And if you have any questions about accessibility, Rochelle Ashmore is our accessibility coordinator, and she's really great. And we have a whole section too on our website about both accessibility and advocacy. And we also have, this is a new kind of thing, but we're doing these monthly lunchtime webinar things with lots of different topics. So I would encourage you to check out our website if you have time. Does anyone have any questions? And that's in your packet, so. All right.
Yeah, it's perfect. All right, so Diane and Kevin, if you guys want to come back up, and Mike's going to give you a mic for you guys to share, and if you want to share this one. So if anybody has any questions in the audience, go for it. I would ask our folks here if you would repeat the question just for the purpose of the recording.
Okay. Maybe it'll carry over.
Is this working? Yeah.
She has a question. Yeah.
So when you were saying about having the, successful grant proposals on the website for review, do your organizations also do that? I assume you're kind
We're getting ready to revise the grants section of our website, and I can give you a sample application, a successful application, if you'll request it, but we are getting ready to post those on the website.
I can't emphasize enough how important it is to reach out to the grantor for grants, but we can certainly give you advice, and we will provide sample examples if you want to review grants. I'm going to try to get some past grants online for you to have the opportunity to review. I do think that's an important part of it.
I just wanted to say, because I get this question a lot, and and I try to encourage folks to remember this when they apply. If you apply for a grant with us and you get turned down, you can ask for the reviewer's comments, and I will share them with you and encourage you to always apply again. I'll tell you just recently that an organization here in Tallahassee finally got a grant approved on their 5th try. And, you know, we don't expect everyone to be a grant writer, and we understand that, but we do encourage you to ask for reviewers' comments so that you can tweak your application accordingly for the next round. Now, the next round is going to be a different panel of reviewers, and their chemistry may be a little different, and their idiosyncrasies about emphasis may be a little different. But I can't emphasize enough, you know, try again.
I just have one thing I failed to mention in terms of COCA's grant process. We have a something called a courtesy review process for all grant writers. So you can come in and meet with me during a 2-month period once the guidelines are released. And we will do a courtesy review of your application, give you a sense of I didn't go into the details of how our grant scoring process works, but 40% of your score, of your grant score, is based on a technical review process, and that courtesy review addresses the technical issues related to your grant to help you to get a better grant score. The second thing I wanted to mention is I failed to mention, we have a brand new grant program. It's $5,000. Unfortunately, it's a very small grant. We just started it. It's specifically for arts educators. So if you are, and I think it's only K through 12, it would not apply to professors, unfortunately. But if you are an arts educator or working in schools and interested in that, we also have that program available, and I'm happy to answer questions about it.
And we provide all of the scores and comments because of the whole government in the sunshine thing. So that's part of our online system, which we're actually getting a new grant system next year, but it'll just be even better than the one that we have now. But you can actually log in 48 hours after the panel. You can log in and you can see all of your scores of each of the individual reviewers and how many points they gave you in each of those 4 criteria, and then you can also see their comments. And the other thing that is nice about the participating in the meetings is, A, you're available to answer a question, so if they have a question about something, potentially you can gain points back if you're there and prepared and able to answer it. And then the second part is, you know, sometimes they will discuss other applications, but it will kind of clue you into things that they're looking for, or they might say, you know, oh, whatever organization, your accessibility section was excellent. And so then you can like say, well, maybe I should ask for their grant because they're doing something with their accessibility that I should do.
A couple of other things. COCA offers, and I think we may all do that, workshops.
Yes.
Workshops related to grant writing for the specific grant application. So that's another thing I encourage you to take advantage of before you sit down to write the application. We offer a workshop, grant writing workshops.
For our programs of the Division of Cultural Affairs, we don't allow any state funds to be used as match. Some organizations, some areas of universities find other ways to provide the match. Sometimes it's harder for people in departments, But an example would be the FSU Museum finds their match through donations. You know, there's a donation box when you walk into the museum. They also might get a grant from some other organization that's not state funds, and so they match the grant with that.
And the thing that I was going to say that I forgot, just speaking about workshops, because most of you guys are artists or, you know, of some capacity, is another program that we have is the creative capital workshops that we do throughout the state. And you can find information about that on our website, but it's basically a workshop that kind of addresses for you, you know, ways that you can be a working artist. And Ginny Grimsley actually does those with Morgan Lewis at our office. And I think they're going to like Sarasota or something, but they do them throughout the state, you know, maybe 4 or 5 times a year. But they are interesting workshops, and the feedback that we've heard from anyone that has participated in them has been positive.
With regard to your question, Beth, too, the mini grants that I was talking about are actually part of our federal re-grant funding. So as long as the match that the organization is wanting to make is not federal funds, we can't match federal with federal, yeah, it's fine.
For the Florida Humanities Council, you mentioned projects involved at the community conversation. So I was almost a little confused because I'm trying to figure out, I'm the chair of the LSU Artistic Association, but I also work with disabilities for both considered nonprofit. And we're working on ways of using art to be like a help mediator, but there's education about social justice issues in underserved communities. It appears to me that this would be grant to apply for, but I was confused when you said we were going to look for actual advocacy, so they would consider advocacy.
It depends on how the application is tempered, and that's where conversation, you know, helps. If it's a fairly balanced project, I think it sounds like it could be potentially eligible for funding. On that note, I'll just give you all a heads up that stay tuned to our website, and I've put some forms over here. If you want to sign up for our Forum magazine, I've left copies for you to take with you. If you sign up on that form and just leave it for me or mail it back in, or go online and sign up for our e-news and indicate that you've been at this workshop, you can get Forum then for free. But we are getting ready to offer, out of another pool of funds, but I'll be administering the application process, a major grant opportunity for up to $15,000. I won't know until we get through a board of directors meeting next week, but there are 3 subjects under consideration. One is race and ethnicity, and this sounds like it could be something that comes up in there. Issues of social justice. Another subject area that we're looking at specifying projects for is projects to do with veterans, and we already, if you visit our website, will see that we sponsor a number of projects to do with veterans around the state. And the other is an ongoing initiative in the council, which has been going on for a couple of years and probably will go on for another couple of years, is projects that involve water, the issues of water, very broadly, but something to do with water. And in Florida, that's a pretty easy project to address. But we are very influenced right now by a big NEH initiative on the legacy of racial issues in this country. And so we're formulating an opportunity to fund projects up to $15,000 that will bring community members together to learn from each other, and this sounds like it could be a good opportunity.
I'm trying to get an understanding of the grant with the public facilities. So is it
No, there's fairly strict state statutes in terms of what's eligible and what facilities are eligible for that money. So the facility has to specifically be an arts specific facility, so not arts related facility, which does arts programming. So it couldn't necessarily be held anywhere. I mean, it would have to be.
Department of Education, our education requirement.
The Department of Art Education, if it had but again, like I said, it's only museums or auditoriums that are strictly speaking eligible.
And one last thing, we do have a conference every year, and this year it's in Gainesville, and it's, I think, February 22nd is when it starts. But those are a nice way to be able to meet other people kind of in the field, and we have artists that go, we have administrators that go, and there's, you know, a lot of interesting conversations that happen at that. So last year our theme was diversity and inclusion. We launched our diversity awards where we recognize programming in the state where exemplary diversity handling is happening. And then this year I think it's the environment or something, but it should be interesting. So.
Also, I'll just mention one quick thing. I assume many of these people in this room are grant writers. And so we often at COCA find, we work with many organizations who are writing a grant for the first time and woefully unprepared, to put it bluntly. So if you have experience and interest in working with organizations or individuals who are interested in grant writing, and that's your area of interest or expertise, I encourage you to reach out to us, Kevin at TallahasseeArts.org, and we can, one of the things I try to do is put organizations in touch with individuals who can help them prepare a grant. And that could be a paid opportunity for some of you. So.